Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 190th New Social Environment. I'm Henry Addison, a production assistant here at the Brooklyn Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation between Chuck Smith and Benn Northover and their guests David Belisle, Raha Raissnia, Ranaldo, and Leah Singer, with a video contribution from Mike Figgis. We will be hearing about the gigantic life and work of filmmaker, poet, and artist Jonas Mekas, and about To Jonas With Love, a multimedia exhibition honoring Mekas currently on view at Keysmith Gallery's East Village location, as well as their annex on Mott Street. To begin, I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation, the traditional owners of Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters on which we stand. The Brooklyn Rail recognizes the illegal annexation of the Republic of Artsakh as a grave international injustice. We stand in support of the Armenian people and the global Armenian diaspora. Finally, the Brooklyn Rail stands in solidarity with the uprisings in response to the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Nina Pop, David McAtee, James Scurlock, Jamel Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, Rhea Milton, Dominique Remy Fells, Toyin Salau, Walter Wallace Jr., and countless others we have lost to white supremacy and police violence in this country, and acknowledge that justice will come from the streets, from the nation demanding accountability and refusing to move on until Black Lives Matter in the eyes of the state. Before I introduce our hosts, we'd like to begin with a brief moment of silence. Thank you. And now to introduce today's hosts. Chuck Smith is a filmmaker, TV producer, and writer who has produced documentaries and TV series for National Geographic, Discovery, CBS News, and many others. His films include Barbara Rubin and the Exploding New York Underground, and Forrest Bess, Key to the Riddle. The latter film was turned into a book and published in 2013 by Powerhouse Books. Chuck's other independent films and interviews can be found on his YouTube channel, Chuck Smith NYC, and on Vimeo, and I will drop links to both of those in the chat. Benn Northover is an actor and director. He was a close friend and collaborator with Jonas Mekas for over 2 decades, leading to several film and video projects and a number of international gallery exhibitions at institutions, including the Centre Pompidou, BFI London, and NSE's Galerie du Jour in Paris. In 2012, Northover co-curated the landmark exhibition of work by Mekas at the Serpentine Gallery in London, alongside Hans Ulrich Obrist. Both are the curators of the aforementioned show To Jonas With Love. Chuck and Benn, thank you so much for being here, and please feel free to take it away.
Yes, thank you, Henry, and thank you to the Rail for supporting us so much. And thanks to the Keysmith Gallery too for accepting this show. And as we said earlier, it's at 2 locations. So the one is the main gallery at 4th Street between A and B, and the other is the multimedia film video annex, which I'm in here at 181 Mott. And so I guess just to say how the show got going, I just kind of had like a little dream about 2.5 months ago, and I remembered a show that Jonas had done for Barbara Rubin where it was called To Barbara With Love. And just the term To Jonas With Love came into my mind. And I'd been reading about him, reading his diaries all summer and thinking about how he would react to this time period. And just knowing him as someone who had been through so much as a displaced person and everything else, and had seen so many ups and downs of New York, I just sort of wanted to bring his spirit back. And I don't know, I had only met Benn once or twice, but I knew we were fellow patriots and lovers of Jonas, and he responded right away and said, this is a great idea. And so with that kernel, we just reached out to everyone. So I reached out to about half the people that are in the show on my end, and then Ben reached out to his half. And together, I think we brought together a great, very quick, rapid show of unique stuff, because it seemed like there was a pent up feeling of like, oh, we miss Jonas. And then of course I mentioned this to Fong, and we all miss Jonas. And as Fong said, he's the patron saint of the rail. And he's kind of the patron saint, I think, of a lot of people. And so I just wanted to thank all the artists who came together, and particularly Ben for gathering the artists that he knew. And then, I mean, I guess in a second I'll get to Ben and he'll introduce some of the other people, but I want to just acknowledge everyone else, the artists who are here on the Zoom. First, there's David Belisle, who's a photographer, great photographer who knew Jonas and works in Michael Stipe's studio and provided a lot of the great posters and some of the great art, which you'll see later. He's working with gold now, which looks great, and we'll show some images later. Then I see Lee and Leah, Ranaldo and Leah Singer, who I thank them so much, because I had seen there was a tribute at the City Winery, and Leah had done this slideshow thing, and then Lee played in front of it, and it was a great performance. And I think they modified that a little bit for this show, and it looks great. And oh, I guess maybe we should pause and talk so I don't keep talking. So anyway, so Lee and Leah, why don't you tell us about just your piece and why you wanted to participate?
Well,
Chuck, why don't you finish introductions first?
Okay, I'll listen to you, Lee. Good. Okay, well then we have right. There's only one more. Oh, it's Raha. Okay, there's Raha. So and Raha I had never met before either. And Jonas's son Sebastian said, "Hey, you should contact Raha." And then Ben knew Raha, and so immediately I love Raha, and she drew the To Jonas With Love, which is on our sign outside, and she had a great painting. And one of the things was to have someone from every, painters, filmmakers, photographers, multimedia, anyone. And so it's really nice to have someone who, I know she's a multi-discipline artist, but her painting is lovely that's in the show. And I think she'll talk later about where that painting came from. So those are the people who are here. And in a little bit, well, Ben, why don't you just say a few things about your end?
Well, I think this exhibition, it's really timely, because in the last few months, leading up to when this exhibition opened, and when we were, inviting people in, a lot of the conversations I would have with people were like, what would Jonas think of the now? What would Jonas be commenting on? Jonas was a great commentator, an observer. He had a wonderful way of distilling common sense into a phrase and a world observation. And I think a lot of people really, as you say, they miss Jonas. We all do desperately. We all do very much, put it that way. And he's with us every day. But I think that this was a wonderful moment where he'd all been on our minds in a very active sense. So talking to Jem Cohen, talking to Mike Figgis, talking to Michael Stipe, talking to David, and all of you, everybody wanted to give to this exhibition, not just because of Jonas, but because they wanted to almost give a message. It was a very timely thing. So I think it's wonderful how everybody just jumped to it, even like the Mike Figgis piece that we'll see later. Very personal odes to Jonas, and he continues in much of our work,
Yep. So yeah, maybe we could say a little bit, David, can we come back to you and just mention the pieces that did you immediately think, oh yeah, I've got stuff, or what led to the pieces you put in, and if you want to say something about your relationship with Jonas.
I think I met Jonas like 9 years ago when I first moved to New York through friends at a dinner, and I wasn't even that much aware of his work or even of anthology film archives yet at that point. But I just remember I really liked him immediately. He had like such a great smile, and like I loved his voice and his accent, and he like had like a twinkle in his eye, and I just could relate to him so much, because I feel like I'm stuck being 8 years old myself, even though I'm way older. But then a year later, I got hired to take his portrait for a story in a magazine, and I thought it was going to be like a studio setting, taking pictures of him there, but he had just gotten out of the hospital, and he was doing Ben was doing the interview with him. So it was, they're such great friends. We did it at his house, and they invited me to his house to take the portraits there, which was way better because it was more fly on the wall, and I didn't have to, and I think, I just remember like one point during the interview part, I was crouched down on the floor and trying to be quiet but taking pictures of Jonas talking to Ben. And I had all my cameras spewed out. I had like 4 cameras and like 13 rolls of film. And Jonas got up to go to the bathroom, which he had to walk past me. And I remember he looked down at my mess of cameras and looked at me, and I was like, oh shit. And then he looked over at Ben and goes, now that's a photographer. And it totally made me so happy. And it made it so easy to take pictures the rest of that day. And it was really awesome afternoon. I love that, and all the pictures in the show are from that day actually.
Yeah.
And it was great. And I've gone to some events. Of course, I learned about anthology and everything more. But when I first moved here, I wasn't very educated on it. So it was a great way to meet him. I loved his spirit. Great guy.
It was always a challenge for photographers because Jonas was such an immediate filmer, as he called himself. He'd react to a moment in front of him. So when somebody like David came along, he was like, come on, just click it. Why are you taking so much time? Just click it. And I knew that David's energy was so humble and so sensitive. And he really just entered quietly into the space. And it was wonderful to watch them, almost dance together. And David really captured Jonas well that day. And yeah, he had a good trust for you.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, I'm sure everybody here probably had Jonas do the same thing, turn the camera on them, or, he was hard to capture because he would turn the camera on you sometimes. So Lee and Leah, can you tell us a little bit about your piece and your relationship with Jonas?
Well, I met Jonas when I first moved to New York in the late 80s. My first stop here was Anthology. I wanted to work there. I wanted to meet him. I had been working in experimental cinema in Montreal, and he was really a God figure for me. And I remember I actually had a copy of Bomb magazine with a feature of Jonas in it, and I brought it to Anthology, and I saw him walking. I was volunteering, and he was walking down the hall, and I asked him for his autograph. And, he drew a flower, of course, under his name. And that was, late 80s. And I hung out a lot at Anthology. I worked at Anthology. I volunteered at Anthology. And the one thing I always associate with Jonas are flowers. He loved the sunflower, and he loved having flowers, and they represented life for him. So the piece in the show are magnolias that they're not slides, actually, Chuck. They're 16 millimeter film shot in a 35 millimeter camera, which was my sort of signature style for a while when I was using film. And the magnolias are a tree in City Hall Park, which is across from my home. So we just, as you said, we did a little something for Jonas's memorial at City Winery. And we cut that from a larger piece, and Lee made some new music. And it's just, it's got a very interesting rhythm and cadence to that film. The films are, the frames are half frames, and they're always shown in twos, side by side. So it's just, it is a kind of dance. The film has a strange rhythm, and Jonas had a strange rhythm. He was in step and out of step, which was what was so lovely about him.
Yes, that's a good way. That's a good way to put it. My relationship to Jonas goes back to studying film in Binghamton when I was a student there in the 70s with Ken Jacobs and learning about all these filmmakers. And Jonas just, he led a life that inspired all of us. And that's why we're all here, I think. And his films have been so moving to me to see. They're out of step with they're films of the American avant-garde in the most pure and diaristic fashion, which I absolutely love. And his his whole countenance, he really is a model of taking the idea of art is life in a way, because his whole time on the earth was about creating art and seeing the beauty in the world. There's a picture of our double frame image on the screen now. And
Well,
right till the end of his life, Leah has a film documenting him singing with a band when he was celebrating his 95th birthday about a year before he passed. And he was just inspirational and energetic and insightful and inspiring for his whole artistic life.
and the other thing I just want to point out about Jonas is his inclusiveness of inviting everyone in to anthology. He, especially women, I did want to note that he loved Maya Deren, of course, we all know that, and Marie Menken, and was always supportive of women filmmakers, always supportive of diverse filmmakers. They always had a home at Anthology, and that was unique and rare at points in New York's history. So we have to give that to Jonas. He was really a visionary when it came to understanding that everyone had a voice, and they used their film as a way to express themselves, and they always had a place to show it.
The other aspect of Jonas that I mean, maybe it's so obvious, is that in addition to a kind of prodigious career as a filmmaker, and I always admired the way he made the transition to video without any of that snobbery of certain filmmakers out there who wanted to keep the purity of film. The older guys that adapted to video and just made the transition and kept right on working were so inspiring. But in addition to his work as an artist, he took on this gargantuan task of creating a much needed home for experimental cinema. And, the trials and tribulations of Anthology's growth over the years, with so many people stepping out to help them and support them and see and recognize the importance of creating such a home for experimental cinema, which he's, really accomplished. And lots of people have chipped in over the years. Sonic Youth has done benefit concerts and records for Anthology. So many people have. And, in addition to all of his work as a filmmaker, he was also an organizer of prodigious talents.
Very much.
Yeah, and a great businessman. Jonas was always working in his sweet way to support and keep Anthology alive, which was always sort of a delight.
Yeah, and since you mentioned Anthology, it is their 50th anniversary, and
Yes.
I encourage everybody to go to their website and their Vimeo page to see the great tributes. I think you guys did a couple there from everyone. Yep, Leah did. And and also 10% of anything we sell, and this is a show that has things for sale. You can buy some of Jonas prints, you can buy some of the art you might see on the later, and 10% will go to Anthology of any sales. And I guess it's a good time. You mentioned working at Anthology. I think Raha, you worked at Anthology too, Raha, right?
Yes, I moved to New York. I didn't know about Anthology. I just happened to walk in one evening and watched the film, and I felt the great free spirit of the place. So just from going there one time, I knew it's a very special place, and so because of that, I returned there and just sort of attached myself to the place and asked if I could be there, and if I, of course, wanted to, also do something, contribute somehow. So that's how I started working. And just from, like the place itself, very humble work, like cleaning the bathroom, cleaning the office. And in return, I watched this amazing, mind-blowing, beautiful works that was so inspiring. And I was 27 when I moved to New York, and so a special age, I think, which according to Jonas, but it just happens that I was also 27. And I can't say it was a comforting place, but somehow, I felt it sort of saved me, because maybe I had the kind of the misfit spirit myself. So, it was difficult to be in New York and be poor and lost and not know anyone and be a little bit crazy. So it sort of gave me energy, because it sort of accepted me as who I was. So I could just be there, and they didn't welcome me in like a nice, they weren't like kind and paying attention, but I felt free there. I had a kind of I felt the sense of anarchic, sort of wonderful, free spirit there. And also the works that I saw was really moving, and I don't know the right word, but it was influencing me, and I couldn't let go of the place. So I would go there every evening almost, and just sort of hang out and watch these films, but also hang out, and just was kind of my place of refuge, let's say.
That sounds like Andy Warhol in 1961. He did the same thing. He went to the Cinematheque and watched and absorbed everything. So your experience is so great to hear, because a lot of people have had the very same experience. And Shannon Plum is a filmmaker in the show who has a similar story. But Raha, I'm looking at the painting here. Can you tell us about the painting and your art, and how Jonas has inspired your art in some sense?
Yeah, Jonas and all the films, all the great works that I got to see or learn about, all influenced me throughout the years. I was already a painter. I studied painting at the University of Chicago before I moved to New York. So throughout the years when I worked there, I never thought about making films. I was very much a painter, and so the way it happened is a musician asked to. Jonas gave me my first like a solo gallery exhibition at the Courthouse Gallery, because he's very generous, and it was available, made it available to me. So I showed my paintings there, and one time a musician came and asked to collaborate with me. He said that he was mostly, as a musician, he was inspired by painters more than musicians or other art forms. So through this collaboration with the musician, and a kind of a element of duration and time came in, and that's how I started making films. It's a long story, but in a very kind of primitive way, painting on celluloid and moving it through just a lens and a light source. So that's how I started making films, but I always continued to paint and draw, and all these mediums really connect to one another still, so they really feed one another.
Yeah, I think that's something that Jonas always acknowledged throughout history. If you want to go back to the 50s, 60s, or 70s, it's always this intermix. It's so interesting to hear you say that, and that you make films and paintings, and because he really believed in the interaction, and that you were working with musicians. And as we heard earlier,
it wasn't a separate thing for him. It was like visual art and poetry. It all was connected. So definitely, I never really even had to think about it. Like, am I a filmmaker? Am I a painter?
Yes.
So they kind of all connect.
That's great.
It reminds me of the story, Chuck.
Go ahead, Ben.
Raha's Jonas took great joy in watching Raha grow as an artist, and also, become much more known. And he adored her, but also Raha was a big part of a tight community that played music around Jonas. And One of the other artists in the show is August Vakalis, who Raha knew as well, who actually lived at Anthology. He lived behind the screen in the Courthouse Theatre and at times in the basement. And August as well was very much a musician and a painter and a filmmaker, very much inspired by Brakhage, painting delicate on film. And some of the illustrations in the show that August has in this show, To Jonas With Love, are very similar to the work that he illustrated Jonas's dream book with. And that, again, I mean, it takes us back over and over to Jonas's invitation and creation of a really a community. People had a place to belong. People had a place to experiment, to grow, and music, film, art, whatever it may be. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about this show, is it brings together so many eclectic voices, eclectic artists, you know. But yeah, Raha, you played music live on stage with Jonas many times.
Yes. Yeah, we were very free and inspired, and you know, we had moments of explosive moments with our spirit. Yeah. So dance and music just come out of that. So we weren't like trying to be anything or trying to be musicians or artists or anything like that. But,
and
yeah,
I want to.
Jonas's. Oh, sorry. I just was going to add that I think Jonas's, you know, his immigrant story has a lot to do with what we're talking about. You know, Jonas came to New York after witnessing, you know, the devastation of war in Europe, and, you know, had his brother here, you know, had this, you know, incredible journey to come to America. And for him, you know, his eyes were really open. And I think, you know, this idea of community and seeing people do things with nothing, which he had just come from. I mean, he had a camera in the camps. This is a really crazy story, but my mother was in the DP camp in Kassel, Germany, at the same time as Jonas. Wow. She was much, much younger than Jonas. And when she was actually here and picked up Jonas's book and went, wow, he's writing about Kassel. And we made this connection. And when Jonas showed his photographs at Documenta, they did immigration was the theme. I think it was 2016, Ben, would you remember the date? A few years ago.
I know that, yes, it was a few years ago.
So I had asked Jonas to see the photographs. I wasn't traveling to Kassel to see Documenta, but I wanted to show them to my mom to see if it would trigger anything in her memory. And it was really an incredible experience. Jonas shared the photos with me, and it really did trigger my mom, who was a very, very young girl at the time. So, you know, all of that experience that Jonas brings to who he is, he was, is really important. I think that we can't ignore just thinking about the immigrant experience, like the wider experience of what that means.
I mean, Jonas speaks about, you know, when he arrived in New York in 1949, he speaks about arriving in New York and just there being, you could buy oranges, the amazing things like this, and this complete explosion of culture, from theater to music to literature, everything was happening. And he actually had a ticket to go to Chicago, as we all know, and he didn't go. He was like, no, I'm here, and this is where we want to be. And very quickly, Jonas, you know, relatively quickly found a community and started to build. And I think you're right, this came out of a desperation and a hunger. And throughout his life, Jonas always said that a lot of what he did was out of necessity as well. These things needed to exist. There needed to be a place for people to come together. There needed to be a place to show the films. And I think this element of drive, necessity, as you said, goes all the way back to when he was a child, you know? Mm-hmm.
He was also very much in the moment. And he talks about when you're in the moment, you sort of let go of all this stuff that you experience and you just feel happy, and you're maybe with some friends, or very simple things like a nice glass
of bottle of wine.
Yeah.
or two.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you're in the moment, then you're open. You open to
yes.
You accept things. And
this is a good time.
All this stuff in the past. And
yeah, I wanted to point out Ben's film of Jonas, which is in the back of the gallery on Mott Street. is incredible because it's just a scene of Jonas at home making pancakes with Sebastian and trying to open these jars of jam, which I told Ben just cracked me up. I had never seen that film before. But what was that? Tell us about that film, Ben.
It was crazy. I remember filming it knowing that I was, documenting it with the idea of editing it into a piece about Jonas. 20 years later, Chuck calls me and says, hey, let's do this show. So it sat there for a long time. And it was, I admit it was quite a cathartic experience because I knew that Jonas would be very much about show the process, don't cover it up. And this must have been 2001. I just got to know Jonas. I was a couple of years in and I was at the house and, he lived at 491 Broadway, which was this wonderful old printing loft. And as any of you have been there, you remember in the summertime, you'd have the ink stuck to your feet. And and this was his mother's recipe, but he cooked these pancakes, throughout his life. And as he says in the film, like Sunday pancakes was a ritual. But I love these ritualistic elements to Jonas's life, these celebratory things, may it be around the cooking of the pancakes, the coming together over a bottle of wine, as you said, the dancing, the singing. And really, I looked at this footage and I thought, this doesn't, I'm not editing this footage. I'm just, how should we say, assembling it,
Right.
And
it's beautiful.
It's one of, thank you. It's really a very special moment of when Jonas was inside this moment, as Raha said, the now, he could have been cooking, he could have been editing, he could have been dancing, but it was his complete and utter involvement. And to watch the process. So, as I said, 20 years later, I decided, right, it's time to sit down and cut this, which...
Yeah, no, absolutely. He doesn't take the now for granted. He doesn't take it for granted. He really is so present.
I think that's what I meant by art as life. He lived every moment that way. That was what was so inspiring.
Very much.
And to bring it back to this essential moment with the COVID and everything, that's what I really felt like. I mean, I think art and film is an essential business in some sense. And I know we were all feeling like those moments are what are the only thing that are keeping us surviving through this dark period. And so I'm glad you mentioned that because watching the potato pancakes, anybody can come in a safe way and come to Mott Street and see that film and many others. The first people who walked in the door were dancing in front of one of the films. And I thought to myself, if nobody else comes through the door for the next 3 weeks, Jonas will be happy and we'll be happy. And if Leah saw the pancake film, then I'm happy. So it's these little things that are so great. And I also want to talk about the young people. I'm sorry, it's a fact of life in New York right now. The more people out in the street are younger, for good or bad. And they're wearing masks, but they've come into the show and they don't know who Jonas is. And they're so amazed and thrilled at all the work here. And for a brief moment, they forget about things and that's the secret, that nowness that everyone was just saying, that's the secret to living long. I think that's what kept Jonas alive for so many years, being in the moment. And so speaking of, just Chuck, sorry to interrupt. What I wanted to say about that is, people aren't traveling so far and wide in the city right now. So the beauty of the show on Mott Street with the video in the window and through the window, it's the people just walking by. So the evening that we were there, I met 2 people, the young girl who had already come to visit you, but then I met a gallerist who didn't really know Jonas's work. And he just happened to be walking by. So I love that it's just this very localized event in a weird way. The people who just happen to be walking by and learning about him if they didn't know who Jonas was. I mean, that's really beautiful. Yeah, and I should say that you don't even have to come in. You can walk by and you can see Lee and Leah's film. You can see Lee mentioned Ken Jacobs, who is doing well, and his wife Flo, and you can see them in the window. They did a great film called Jonas Mekas in Kodachrome Days, which we're playing just outside, so you can even just watch that. So yeah, I want to thank Ken also for being in the show, and his friend Henry Hills jumped into the show too, and you can see his double Elvis piece in the window. So I also want to say shout out to a couple other people in the show. Jim Joe who's a young artist who wouldn't do this because I don't think he shows his face anywhere, but he's a great artist and was a good friend of Jonas. And like me, only got to know Jonas in the last 5 years of his life. So the fact that Jonas would meet people and get to know them when in his 90s, I hope I'm still making friends in my 90s.
Yeah.
So Jim Joe had 2 pieces outside of Key's gallery. Yeah, there they are. And they're just beautiful things. And one is a map of Jonas's life.
After reading I Had Nowhere to Go.
Yeah, after reading I Had Nowhere to Go. And the other is I think it's actually a drawing, but it might be a photograph of Jonas's hand, which comes from something that he sent. Also, as Ben said, very personal. These were all very personal things. And the fact that they're sharing them publicly is great for all the artists.
Yeah. I mean, one of the kind of, should we say, the metaphors, whilst describing this to people and saying, hey, please come and be a part of this, was a bit like one of those wonderful dinners at Jonas's house where either he or Sebastian would have cooked and everybody brings, say, a dish. And that's the wonderful thing about this show, is that it's very personal work. It is either directly or indirectly connected with Jonas. It's either of Jonas or about Jonas or around. Every piece has such a beautifully personal story to it. That I look back and I think, wow, this is it's more than a love letter to Jonas. It's more than a tribute. It's a feast, you know.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I just saw a question. Charlie, someone said, is there going to be a catalog? And yes, there will be a catalog. We've done this show so quickly, we haven't been able to do the catalog and the show at the same time. So I wish the catalog was available now, but it's not, but it will be available later. And it's going to be amazing because we're going to add other stuff and also people's statements about the work that's in the show, which are also very moving. I guess we have a slide. Stephen Shore is in the show. And yeah, there he did a photo of Jonas and Andy. And I don't think Stephen had thought about Jonas for a little while. He's teaching up at Bard, but he right away said, sure, I'm going to send a print down. And then he sent a little note saying that when he was 15 years old and wandered in the factory and wandered over to the Cinematheque, Jonas was the only one who accepted him as an artist immediately and let him show his films and let him take pictures as a 15 or 16-year-old. So, and these stories just go on. And so it's really nice that Stephen could participate too. And yes, there will be a catalog book/zine that will get out to everyone.
And because this show is so much about people's relationships, dialogues, journeys, influence from Jonas, all of this stuff, what's great about doing a publication is that we ended up describing it more like a fanzine, in that it doesn't just depict the work, but it overflows into people's relationships with Jonas, the stories, the tales, and we can explore that as a work unto itself, you know, to accompany the exhibition as opposed to simply illustrate it. It's exciting.
Yep. And I got to say one more thing. There's a little bit of a Barbara Rubin film. I had done a film with Jonas about a documentary about Barbara, and there's a clip of something that really nobody's ever seen, and we'll show some stills of that. So there's a lot of undiscovered. Gordon Ball sent some footage of Jonas from 1966. There's a Vimeo showcase for the show where you can watch some of these films, but nobody's ever seen that film. And I transferred it and trimmed it a little bit, but it's just a great peek back in time to 1966 when Jonas visited his all-male Southern school and talked about avant-garde film and brought Gordon a camera. He came off the train, handed him a camera, and that's what the film that you can see in the show is. His first experience shooting film, and he's shooting Jonas, who's shooting film. So there's a lot of great little treasures in the film. And anyway, let's see, what else is on the agenda? Maybe we'll go to the Mike Figgis. Do you want to introduce that so he can have his say, Ben?
Yeah, Mike Figgis, he's filming in Korea right now, so his time is upside down. But he made this wonderfully tender, personal letter, this video piece, which is in the show, Mike and I met at the Photographers Gallery in London many, many years ago, and he and Jonas got on very, very quickly, very fast. They picked up speed. Mike actually interviewed Jonas a few times with video and on page, and they really had a great respect for each other as filmmakers, as people. There was a great curiosity they shared. When I asked Mike to make a piece for the show, I didn't realize how totally personal it was going to be and candid, and I think the piece speaks for itself. But it's lovely to hear Mike speaking about Jonas with such level-headedness and such heart. And we can really see that Mike is one of many whose work has been heavily influenced, and it will carry on. You know, it's a lovely piece. Take a look.
Oh wait, this is this.
Hi
okay.
everyone. So this is Mike Figgis, and I'm in Islington, and I'm outside the Duke of Cambridge pub, and it's like a gastro restaurant. And it was here on the 12th of April, 2018. It was the last time I saw Jonas. He came to visit me in my studio just down the street, and he just had a very, very hearty meal. And I remember, I think he ordered a pint of beer, maybe, and then he ordered a second one. I know he ate a lot, and then we set off and walked down the street now to my studio. I'll tell you one funny story, because he was, a couple of years back, he was honored.
Wait, I have to interrupt because, wait a minute. This
British
is a
Film
longer film. Can we fast forward? Ben had trimmed this a little bit. There's a great Jonas story here, but we won't have time for it. But if you go around further in, like around, yeah, somewhere around there. Sorry, we just don't have time to watch the whole thing, but a little further. Yeah, maybe right around there.
Wonderful and fundamental idea. And
or I'm sorry, go back a little bit.
as far as I'm
sorry.
concerned, you're down as well. As I
It's
re-examine all the kind of films that I've made over the last 40 years that are sitting on shelves. I mean, I don't mean studio films. I mean stuff that's just like Jonas stuff, you know, just observations, and that constitutes a kind of archive that one can dip into and use and reuse, a kind of collective memory. So thank you, Jonas, for reminding me of such a wonderful and fundamental idea. And as far as I'm concerned, you're still around, you know, because your sensibility is still in the ether. So thanks.
But I show them. I like to see. I
Okay,
love
wait.
my films, and
Good
Anyway.
T-shirt.
Yeah, great one. I want one.
Anyway, sorry, but if you want to see the whole thing, you can watch it on Vimeo later. But he tells a funny story, and then Jonas has his say at the end there too.
I think the connection that Mike was making when you watched the
Yes.
piece is basically the fact that you know, he had made studio films. Obviously, Mike is a great artist and musician, and he'd made studio narrative, industrial cinema, as one might say. And meeting Jonas and their relationship really reminded him of the fact that all of the work was, the other work, the personal work, was just as valid. I mean, there's a funny story about Jonas when he was starting to film, where he said he was practicing to make a real film. This one comment freed me up and many others that I've spoken to, because he suddenly realized a couple of years in that the footage that he was shooting daily was just as valid as anything that he could make up in his mind. You know, it's like the old phrase of there's more drama in real life than there is on the stage. You know, it's, and I think this is the wonderful thing about this ode to Jonas from Mike, is that he really talks about how Jonas, just this simple spending time with him, moved his perspective of what it is to be a filmmaker away from simply industrial narrative cinema and a maker, you know, and embracing all of it, just as important as the industrial. It's like Jonas used to always say, cinema is a big tree with many branches. You have the big industrial branches, you have the little diaristic branches, you have the documentary branches. And that's what's wonderful about watching somebody like Mike and Jonas converse, is that it's an ongoing conversation, and it carries on.
Yep. Can I say hi? I see Accra Shep. Accra is one of the artists in the show. Accra, do you want to? Well, I don't know if you want to, if you can unmute yourself, but Accra has a very nice photograph from the streets, and that's in the Key Smith Gallery part of the show. And it was just I asked him to think of something that was very spontaneous and just in the streets, the same streets that Jonas walked around in, and he came up with this image. And anyway, you can just say hi, Accra.
Hey, Chuck. I'm so pleased to be in the show. This is a really wonderful talk. Hey, Ben, we've not met. Maybe after this is all done. Yeah, no, I was born in New York City. So it was, hearing how, Jonas came to the city and was so struck by it, that's what I've always loved. I mean, I've never left. I've been here ever since I was born, pretty much. And so though the main part of my practice isn't cataloging New York, but it is, because I've been here all my life. I just collect New York and those moments that when Chuck said, this is what Jonas was interested in, it's like, oh yeah, I know that. Anyway, thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Accra. And just to let you know, also Accra took a lot of photos of Occupy Wall Street, and there's great shots of Jonas, of course, down at Occupy Wall Street with his own signs when he was however old, 89 or 90. So yeah, Jonas really was everywhere. And someone earlier said, did Jonas know somebody, Namjoon Pike, whatever? Yes, there's nobody that Jonas probably didn't know in the history of downtown New York and through the anthology and filmmaking. So it's about 1:50. I think Lee and Leah have to go soon. If you guys want to say a few more things, and then you can read.
Yeah, I was gonna read a poem by Jonas. Leah and I had done a book that was part of a package, like a DVD package about our project called Drift. And we had as we asked Jonas many times to be part of shows we've done, where he always graciously contributes something, whether it's a poem or an object or film. And so for our book, he gave us this beautiful poem called Imperfect Haikus. And it's short, and I thought I would read it. Do you want to read it with me, or should I just?
Go ahead.
Okay. So here we go. Amazing how all Spring Street ginkgo leaves fell down overnight. On wet sidewalk, a lonely bicycle wheel locked to a tree. On the plain, watching a man asleep, shoes by his side. By the Seine, a leaf fell down. I heard it. Walking by the Seine, a thump of a falling chestnut startled me. What is this in my pocket? 2 chestnuts from Paris. The ashtray is full, glasses empty. I keep writing.
Yeah.
You're Jonas.
Thank you.
Yeah. We miss him.
And that'll be in the catalog. I'm sure we'll reprint that in the catalog.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah.
And it's a good time to remind people that he really is, in Lithuania, he's known as much as being a writer and a poet as he is a filmmaker.
Absolutely.
And his writing is just amazing. And the more you look into it, and his poems, translated from the Lithuanian or not, are all great. And there's a great example.
Yeah.
And he's a great bookmaker.
Yeah.
Fabulous bookmaker. Always loved making books. And I don't know if anyone out there has the censorship book, but it's brilliant. It's just Xeroxed copies of all the censorship cases that went through anthology. And in that period of time, it was, I think it was a very small edition, but he was constantly, putting things together and getting them out in the form of a book. So check out his books.
Yeah. Thanks. Now that you mentioned a book, can we just show Michael's piece for the show? Because he did a book. Michael's type.
David, talk about this piece a little bit.
Oh, well, this is, well,
can you talk about this a little bit? I know this is a piece of a bigger project that Michael's building at the moment, so maybe.
Michael has wanted to photograph a lot of people here. I don't know if you want to try and happen. He's doing a book of portraits, and then right in the middle, right at the beginning of the process of it, COVID happened, and he was unable to photograph. And he was going to wanted to photograph Jonas, but Jonas had gotten ill. So he's actually I think we've done like 45 different book covers of people's names who have inspired him that he wanted to photograph or was going to photograph. And it's going to be they're going to be included in his new book that's coming out this spring.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
And that book's
A couple of, I think it was probably a week before Jonas actually eventually went into hospital. Michael was going to take pictures of Jonas, and Jim Joel was going to interview Jonas. And Michael and Jonas had a very lovely connection. Michael lent his support very much actively towards the expansion project of Anthology Film Archives. And David and Michael formed a lovely community around Jonas. So I think this work is really a beautiful testament to that moment.
Great. Yeah, and I don't know if, so I guess we'll say goodbye to Lee and Lee. If you had one last thing to say, I think you guys had to go.
Sorry, we have a Verizon guy here dealing with a phone issue, so I'm ducking out. I wanted to say about Jonas that, you know, when I first saw his films, I've always been a lover of I gotta go.
I want to just say thanks to Brooklyn Rail for hosting this Zoom, and for Chuck and Ben for putting it together and inviting this great group of people and artists to show their work in the spirit of Jonas. I have to say, and I know that we've all been thinking about this probably. I know I have. In this time of the pandemic, I really do. I think about what would Jonas do? You know, what would he be doing now? He would be out in a mask with his camera in his neighborhood or in his home, just chronicling everything to make sure that it doesn't disappear, so that it's remembered. And that's, that's what I loved about Jonas. I have a tendency to do the same thing, to photograph something, to keep it. So thank you.
Thank you, Leah, and Lee too. And whatever Lee was about to say, we'll put in the book. In the
yes, sorry about that. Pandemic living, Zoom living. Sorry about that. But
okay.
Love to all, and thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Okay, bye. So
there's a book I want to recommend, if it's okay.
Yes, Raha.
It's not in the show, but it's a book that Jonas mailed to me. It's called That's How Angels Arranged. I don't know if you can see.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know this book, Ben?
Yes.
It's a very short book, but if you want to, I carry it with me, and whenever I feel bad or feel stuck, I read it. But if his belief in angels and the way things are, if you talk about his past and the suffering.
Raha, can you say the title and the author, and tell us a little bit about one sentence about it?
So it's called That's How Angels Arranged. And it's inspired by Jonas. It's not a book that Jonas, it's by Lillian Isabella.
We did a live
like
Jonas. Yeah.
Play. It's some kind of a play.
Yeah, she did a play of Jonas, and she took his words and characterized it, and he really adored her and was really impressed with what she did with the show, and told his story as a characterization, and that book was an extension.
It's so condensed, it's so clear, but everything about Jonas, it's in here in this very short book. So I really recommend it, and his acceptance of all the hardship and all the terrible things, and he says this very beautiful thing that I love, that he says it's like cooking. You can mix some things that look good and taste good, and others that by themselves, some spice by itself, you could not take it. But when you mix it together with all the other elements, it's fine. It improves. It makes all the other parts taste better. Same in life. All those moments in my life, which were like those horrible peppers or some spices that are really like horrible, they help to transform, went through transformation, and helped the rest taste better. So in other words, in short, I wouldn't change anything that's happened in my life. That's how angels arranged, and I cannot question. I can question them, but I think they know better than I. So
That's great.
yeah.
Thanks, Raha.
It's a lot there, and
Yeah.
it's great book. And so I think maybe you'll be able to get it at Anthology. I recommend this book. So.
And Jonas, and when he spoke about angels, it wasn't simply religious and spiritual. It was very factual. I remember when very close to the end of his life, we were in the hospital, and he suddenly I thought he was sleeping. He said, "I suddenly realized I'm not immortal." I was like, "What?" And he says, "But I'm going to be very busy. They need my help." And I was like, "Who?" He says, "The angels." He says, "I'm going to be much busier there than I am here." And Jonas's embracing of the continuation. And when he says, "I trust my angels," it was really a very positive belief in hope, a very positive belief in an active move forwards. I mean, a simple comment of Jonas, which many of us heard, was, "It's not a problem, it's a challenge." And this was the other thing about Jonas. I think, thank you, Raha, for setting the conversation on that course, because that's his influence was an active one. He doesn't live just in the past of the 60s, of the 70s. He was so much of a forward-moving vision, and of one of hope and possibility. So I think talking about him now in this moment of the pandemic, it's holding on to the hope and belief. And when he says trust his angels, it just means remember hope and have faith in them.
He believed that you do your absolute best. That's definitely important. That it's not like you leave it to angels. First, you do all the work, you do your very best, and then accept. He says that what you do now affects the next moment. But then there's other elements that take part as well. So
sensitivity.
So you do your best, and then leave the work to angels. And it sounds simplistic, but I think it's very meaningful. And so the book really clarifies this outlook and this philosophy, which I think was very important to him, and I think it's very, very inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he didn't like stick his head in the sand, like just it wasn't like he was looking through the world through rosy-colored glasses. He just said, well, he said you can, but he acknowledged all the troubles, but he also found what was beautiful about them and knew that there's better stuff coming down the road, because there always is. And so anyway, for right now, it is such a good time to look at all these things. And I see, in a minute, I guess we'll have some questions, but I see behind me the last Jerry Joffin, who was a crazy filmmaker who Jonas knew. This is at the installation of Mott Street. And he really just accepted everybody. Jerry did some really great collages that are in the Keith Smith show at the other 4th Street. And he also did these films that have rarely been seen. And I just felt like bringing Jerry back to celebrate Jonas, because most people would have called him a crazy drug addicted nut, but Jonas recognized the brilliance. And he of course never would have succeeded in the real film world, but in the avant-garde world of the 60s, he was respected, and accepted. So that also, some of those will be up on the Vimeo showcase as well. But they're real 60s relics, and no one's seen them. So in a long, long time. Okay. I think we can have some questions if anyone has anything, or anyone else wanted to say anything.
I'm happy to start the questions, and unless anyone would like to add anything.
I think we're good.
Great. Okay, so the first question, we're going to move over to Charlie Schultz, our very own, and I'm going to unmute you now.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks, Chuck and Ben, Lee and Lee, David, Akra, Raha. I miss you so much. I've been rolling on memory lane so hard through this moment and planning how to go see the show tomorrow. But what the stories that I wanted to ask about was thinking about an interview by the playwright Richard Foreman. It was published in the Rail, I want to say about a year ago, but my sense of time has gone to the wind. But I remember very clearly this thought that Richard put forward. And it was basically that avant-garde New York was full of people who were basically bankrolled by their families. And Jonas was not one of these people. I said something like, Richard said, I had enough financial backing, like most people, I knew I wouldn't starve. But Jonas didn't have that. He just managed. So
Yeah.
I guess my question to all of you who are fortunate enough to be so close to Jonas is, what did that look like? What was Jonas managing? What paint me a picture of that? What are some stories of Jonas doing all that Jonas did without the support that so many of his peers were fortunate enough to have?
It was
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll let Ben say something, but I did want to say that's perfect for Jerry Joffin, because Jerry was certainly one of those people who had no means or support, and yet his loft was basically supporting the avant-garde. That's where Flaming Creatures was first shown. Certainly Jack Smith had no means of support. Barbara Rubin, no means of support. The only one who helped them was Jonas, and Jonas himself had no means of support. So he really was a champion of these people who would have been completely forgotten. And yet he very well knew who had finances, and he was very good at, Jerome Hill and people who he knew in the 60s who were so vital to the arts, who he also felt were the same way. I mean, Jerome Hill had his own problems. He may have had money, but I think Jonas recognized him as a kindred spirit and someone who looked to film and art as the inspiration of life. And so I guess the money thing isn't so important, but he was very good at knowing who, where the support could come from. But it wasn't like they were different. He understood that Jerome Hill, all the money in the world, didn't make his life any different than Jerry Joffin's or Barbara Rubin's. They went through the same struggles. And I mean, I saw that very personally too with myself. And I think Ben probably has stories about that, but he was very good at understanding people right away and accepting them for whatever it was.
Yeah, don't worry about money. Just work, do your work. And
That's what he would say, yeah. I mean, the thing is, Jonas survived, I think where it was is where he put the emphasis. He didn't, making money, making a living wasn't really, it didn't compute in the same way. He didn't see anything as a career as such. He kind of laughed at that. Survival was in pieces. He would always trust, make some money here, and that means he'll eat for a while and he can help his friends. But it was really the importance of it. The emphasis was the work. And there were times, even in recent years, where he was struggling. It would be up and down. But, may you call it his angels, but he always had hope. He always believed that it would be okay. And I think that positive driving onward motion evoked the fact that things came around, you know.
Yeah, and in one of
Book,
the
very good book, Charlie.
in his diaries, he said that I think this was written when he was in the forced labor camp. He said that he would never worry about money because he knew that a little piece of bread would sustain him, can sustain a person for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
So that was like at the core of his thoughts. So never worry because of that.
Charlie just held up a very interesting book where some of the dialogue and conversations within that book, published by Spectre Books, is a wonderful piece. It does touch on different people's attitudes towards surviving within the arts, within cinema. But it's a wonderful piece, this. Well done, Charlie.
Great, thank you so much for that insight. And I would love to continue this conversation about Jonas's kind of relationships with the 60s scene. And I think Elizabeth Brown from earlier in the chat would love to go into Pike's relationship further with Jonas. So I'm going to unmute her here. Are you able to unmute? Great.
Yes. Thank you so much, Henry. So I'm sure Chuck is right that Pike and Jonas Mekas were acquainted because, hey, two avant-gardists in the 1960s living in New York are, of course, going to run up against each other. That's not really my question. It seems to me that I find a very close parallel, maybe not similarity, but a parallel in their work in that they both seem to have been shaped by their broader international experiences, their immigration experiences, and they both seem to have approached video as a new technology that could be used to wrap a wider embrace around all humanity, for fundamentally humanizing technology for the arts, making it an art medium. But I find they're on parallel, different separate tracks in art history. They're rarely related or discussed together. There's no Pike in the exhibition. How is that? What am I missing? Why are they not discussed more together? Are there more dissimilarities than I'm aware of? Because I feel as if they were moving in very similar directions over a long time.
I think sometimes while people are talking about artists such as Namjoon and Jonas, they get distracted by the conceptual. And I agree with you completely. With Jonas's work being very diaristic and Namjoon's being perhaps more conceptual in the outcome, people forget the process. So I agree with you completely. I think where they come from, their roots, what drives them, makes them very similar. But I think, as I said, that's where people get lost.
Well,
so he wasn't in the show. Is there a reason he's not in the show?
Oh, well, because I didn't have access to his estate or something to show from Namjoon. But I love the idea of taking any two people who were very influential and finding the commonality. I mean, just that alone is a great idea. So you could do that with so many people, but I do think, like we said, their immigrant experience and their ability to read American culture is key, because they both found unique ways to add to the culture that needed to be heard and seen. And I think they both absolutely had that and sort of read where things were going and were able to figure it out.
They both had a kind of a reverence and a joy, a kind of deeper understanding about no matter what's wrong in the world, that there's a lot to be cherished and valued.
Yeah, very similar to Machunas. I mean, the three of them.
Yes, I agree.
Flair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And I'm very, my interests are piqued by the phrase that you brought up of humanizing technology. And fortunately, Jonas had a very long life, and I'm interested by him living well into the age of social media. I know this can be a quite cheesy question to bring up, but as far as a socialized world, like a social world lived through cinema, essentially, I'm so interested by his perspectives on it, if he knew about it or engaged with it, and if it was an optimistic thing.
Very much. I mean, I remember in 2005, I believe, now my memory is slipping. I think it was 2005, the conversation about his website began to grow. And then in 2007, it was the 365-day project. Jonas was very excited about the opportunity of exchange and sharing. And that's what the internet really, for him, he saw these, he was very excited by the ability to share immediate letters and dialogue with his friends, because in a sense, this is something that had run through all of his work. To my friends, I want to share with my friend, this is a phrase that we hear many times from his work. And this is where he saw the digital age as a very positive thing,
Yep. And he wrote a mean email, always very short, to the point. He was very good with computers and stuff. And I also think he was very much hip to the get it out there. There was no monetization idea about it at all. It was more, I don't know, the Grateful Dead model. Just put it out there and things will happen. And
why go to the army when you can be a pirate?
That's right.
But watching him embrace something as simple. I mean, the 365-day project was really Jonas's kind of experience into entering what the internet could provide for him as an artist. And it was very interesting. I mean, this insane challenge of releasing a film every single day of the year, which wasn't insane at all. Of course, we just couldn't hear the music. I mean, it was a wonderful. And what was incredible is how Jonas didn't, it's like with video. He didn't force video to be like his 16mm. He understood with 16mm, he could capture these moments, these fleeting glimpses. With video, he understood it to be much more of a meditative medium. He would capture the whole scene. He would quietly watch and not get in the way of that recording. And I think what was very exciting is watching him kind of get his head around things like, oh, that should go on Facebook. That should go, these avenues that were opening up. Because in a sense, he's always been about platforms. He was always building platforms for things to take place, the Cinematheque, the Co-op, Anthology. He saw it as a wider way of communication.
He was an early adapter of everything. And actually, one of the stills that we're selling for the show, the film stills of Jonas, is from his last film. It's the one that we use on the advertisement. He looks older, and that's actually one of his last 16mm films. So he kind of knew when that's it.
Outtakes from The Life of a Happy Man.
Yeah, outtakes from The Life of a Happy Man. Late 90s, I think, or 90 something.
Well, no, actually created in 2012 for the Serpentine show. And basically he'd had all these outtake pieces and he'd been looking for an opportunity. And it was very exciting to watch him get his head around actually revisiting some of these pieces and how do they go together and what were they to him? Are they memories? Are they glimpses? They were very present. It's not about nostalgia, so it's interesting. But I think one of the things about social media and now is this Jonas's dedication to the diaristic form. Now we look at Instagram. Now we look at the selfies. It's interesting how much, in a weird way, he was always carving towards it's absolutely different, but it's that kind of diaristic was very much his emphasis.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. I'm just seeing in the chat that we have a couple questions about the show that we should clear up before moving on with more questions. And we just have a question from Adele Eisenstein asking how long the show is on until in both spaces. And then from Claudia Salazar asking whether the videos in the Vimeo showcase are the same shown at Mott Street.
Yes, the answer to the last question is yes, they will be the same. I'm not sure if the longer ones will be there. You can really come to Mott and sit down in the back room and watch Douglas Gordon's full hour and a half, I Had Nowhere to Go, if you want to. There's nobody back there right now. So come on in and sit down and watch I Had Nowhere to Go, watch the Pancake Film. I mean, it's really like a private viewing room, and I don't think we've gotten the word out enough that I'm just sitting here. Anyone can come in and watch anything. And as long as you wear a mask, it's very safe. And so yes, and it's going to be open till December 20th at the 4th Street, the smaller gallery, Keith Smith Gallery between A and B, till the 20th. And this probably to the 20th, but it might go a couple in through the holiday season, because if the space is empty and I'm here, or I can find someone else to sit here, we'll keep it open. So it might be extended, but the 4th Street space will end on the 20th. And then we might move some of the art over here. So thanks for asking that. And things keep changing, and we don't know if essential business, certain businesses will be closed. But like I said before, I consider this an essential business, and we'll see what happens.
So with Jonas.
Yeah.
Exactly. Great.
Buy my painting. Buy my painting, please.
Yeah, buy Raha's painting. It's a great painting. It's a little expensive.
Yeah, we're getting questions about what the hours of the gallery are.
Am I going to be? Yes, I'm at Mott Street right now, and I will stay, because we're open Wednesday through Sunday, and I think Keys Gallery is open Mott Street's Wednesday through Saturday. Keys Gallery is Wednesday through Sunday. But since I'm here anyway for this, I'll stay till 6, 7, maybe.
Great.
Today. But tomorrow it'll be open regular hours, which is 2 to 7 p.m. Because it looks better when it's a little darker. Anyway.
Great. I'll share this info in the chat as well. So we have another question from Nick, and I'm going to pass the mic over to him. You should be able to unmute.
Thank you, Henry, and thank you, everyone. This has been a heartwarming conversation. I have a bit of a practical question. It's a triumph year for Anthology Film Archives, being the 50th anniversary, and we know how dear the anthology was to Jonas and to so many people involved with it. I was hoping maybe you all could maybe speak to the future of anthology, and I know that there were some really important projects Jonas was really committed to in the past couple of years, and perhaps you can talk a bit about that and maybe let us know how we can support it.
Yeah, the reason I said buy my painting had to do with that, because I think we all love Jonas, and we really have to continue the work and keep anthology alive, and really do our best to see through this the project that was so important to him, the building of the library at anthology. So
The Heaven and Earth Library. I mean,
we have to work hard for that, and so that's very important. It was very important to him, and it should be very important to us.
Jonas's dream was really the expansion project. It's not so much an expansion project in that it is only expanding. It's obviously something that Jonas had planned a long time ago. Originally, the anthology building was planned to go much higher. And Jonas wanted there to be much more of an extensive library element to it. And the whole expansion project was to do with strengthening what anthology is now, bringing in archival elements, strengthening that, building a library on top of anthology dedicated to the arts and the downtown community. And this was something that Jonas worked very hard in the last 6-7 years of his life to really build momentum towards the fundraising, which is now in place. It's now moving ahead. And it was through several private events. Fong Bui was very involved as well in this. But right now, anthology is in the place where we just need to really spread the word and make sure that people understand this is a very important place to exist within New York, as you all know already. But it's amazing how much people forget and assume these places just stand. They assume they just exist. And anthology is a non-profit organization. It's a charity cause. And I think that one of the most amazing things that Jonas did was to put in place the momentum that will carry on, and we will expand anthology, we will build it, and the library will exist. But everybody that can help needs to stay on board.
I see Leah's back. Hi, Lee.
All right, great.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm doing something very strange at the moment. I'm actually getting into a car to go to Brooklyn. But, I don't know if you guys touched on it. I'm sorry I had to leave so abruptly. But I wanted to talk about Jonas as a memoirist, because one of the first things that I responded to with him, could you turn the radio off, please? One of the first things that I responded to with him was his those films that were just these long diaristic pieces like Lost, 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 and how moving that was to me as filmmaking. I always talk about this kind of film as being closer to poetry or to poems than to narrative storytelling, classic Hollywood films, and Jonas's work was so important to me in that way, especially because it was documenting this period that I was a little too young to experience, but that I had read so much about, and all of these personages in the films, from Miles Davis to John and Yoko to Ken and Stan Brakhage and all these people. And then, we were talking about his books, and those books hit me in the same way. I found them so moving to read. I Had Nowhere to Go, for instance, which it's a big, thick book, but it's really captivating from the word go. So that's what I wanted to say earlier in a nutshell.
Thanks, Lee. And we are selling his New York Diaries, which came out less than a year ago. We're selling copies at the galleries, and some of the other poetry books and rare books that we happen to have copies of. So the diaries are great. I Had Nowhere to Go is great. And of course, the Douglas Gordon film is here too. So I re-encourage, if people haven't read Jonas, you should read Jonas. And one last thing is Ed Sanders, who's in the show from the Fugs. Ed is an old friend from the 60s. And he always says, I met Jonas through his writing. It had nothing to do with film, because he was reading the movie reviews in the Village Voice. And
sure, he was such a supporter as a critic as well. I mean, his critical writing for the Village Voice popularized the whole format.
Completely.
And legitimized it, really.
What was amazing about that column is the fact that he was covering all of cinema, narrative cinema in Hollywood, and then he put it aside and said, no, I have to emphasize and put my focus on the avant-garde because it needs me. That's how the column, Movie Journal.
Yeah, you tend to forget that I think Marlon Brando was on the first cover of Film Culture magazine. So even Film Culture used to, look at more Hollywood movies, and he's the one who knew where things were going and drifted into the independent and avant-garde world by the time he reached The Voice. So when is this over? How long do we go?
No worries. I'm about to ask our artistic director and publisher Fong to make a final comment. And then we're going to move to Raha's poetry reading, and then we'll conclude with the video of Jonas.
Jonas allowed the final word. Okay,
Absolutely.
Fong.
Yeah, I'm unmuting you, Fong. You should be able to speak.
Thank you, Henry.
Of course.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, all of you, Raha. Obviously, Leah also, and you for doing this too, Ben, and Chuck, and all of our friends who's involved in the show. Seriously. And here's Lee, one of my favorite guitar all time. I mean, one of the great guitar from Sonnet Youth and Be Young. And here he has studied experimental film with our friend Ken Jacob, and love poetry and all form of all the creative arts. That's the culture that we need to reclaim. We have lived in a one-dimensional world for way too long. I mean, in the last NSE program a few weeks ago, Herbert Marcuse's name came up with Jason Smith and Paul Maddock, our field note editor. I can't think at the moment, I can't help but to think of Marcuse's classic book, One Dimensional Man. That was published in 1964, the year the American dream fell apart. It was the year that American grieved JFK assassination. You guys remember? It was the same year that LBJ, who succeeded him, signed the Civil Rights Act. It was the year that poverty, inequality, and war, everything that was going on, we was calling to question from the relationship between the government and the people and the idea of freedom, you know, all of it. Anyway, my point is that for those of us who have not read the book, do read the book, or those who have read the book, we definitely remember the impact, the idea of resistance to one-dimensional thinking and the blasé attitude, the conformist tendency, you know, that was supported by any kind of structure, bureaucracy, is deadly, deadly. You know, I mean, people just tend to be conforming so easily, and we gotta go the opposite. And I remember reading something, maybe an interview that David Foster Wallace, who I met in the early 90s, and he says something so smart. He say, for young people in America, there are very mixed messages from the culture. There's a streak of normalism in American life that extol the virtue of being growing up, having a family, and being responsible citizen. But there's also a sense of do what you want, gratify your appetite. Why not? Because I am a corporation appealing to the part of you that are selfish, self-centered, and want to have fun all the time. It's the best way to sell you things. Why not? And the point that emerges from that is, I think, one more example of the American economic and cultural system that works super well in terms of selling people products and keep the economy going, thriving, but do not work as well when it comes to educated people, children, or helping us each help each other how to live and to be fulfilled, to be happy. So that's my 2 cents. The idea is that what happened to me, Jonas, at this moment represent 2 things. Number 1 is the issue of immigration, which being attacked. There's people like Jonas, Shigeko Kabuta, who that's how exactly Namjoon had met Shigeko. Shigeko was Jonas' secretary in 1964. I think she came in America in 1964 because Yoko Ono told her about Machunas and Fluxus and Jonas. So like all the immigrants came to this culture, they came here because they escaped from their political oppression of their own culture. And they come here, understand their self-worth, because there is an inner freedom within all of them. The idea of self-creation is huge about Jonas. I have nowhere to go. It's a big, beautiful book, Lee. Thank you for remembering it. And I think that's exactly what I feel. And the other thing is, you know, we need to remind ourselves this big question: what and how will we ever undertake the effort to generate, to cultivate more pockets of counterculture that represent the alternative, the unorthodox, the nonconformist, and dissenting voices of artistic bohemians, writer, artist, worker, wherever, you know, these are important. And however way we can manifest, be it a work of art, essay, a poem, music, dance performance, and whatnot, that is something that we need to reclaim. I hunger, therefore, the object becomes food. It's not because food lay before me that drives my hunger. You know, this is so essential. You can't learn that in graduate school. There's no way. So that's, I learned from Jonas, and I shut up because I'm so happy. Thank you, you guys. What I learned from Jonas,
thank you.
Super simple. Haiku, as Raha say. When you get excited about something, do not censor that excitement. Do not walk tiptoeing. You have to fight for it with your great passion and commitment. And anyway, we miss Jonas. We miss you, Jonas. And the question about Nick's concerning about ontology, I'm on the board. And I'm going to work with the board to ensure that it's going to survive. And that capital campaign will get done. And I promise, Jonas and all of you will get involved one way or another. I'm happy that this is going to be recorded and going to put forth in YouTube so people understand what we need and how we need to come together to fight for the, we're not going to be nostalgic, but how can we make advancement without being nostalgic? That's always important. Don't look back, but move forward with what needed. So thank you so much, you guys, for being here. And I can't wait to see the show. And I hope it will do well. We're going to do what we can to spread the word. We will review the show. How do you like that, Chuck? Like,
yep.
Each
Come
other.
on down.
Come on down.
Come on down.
Thank you. Good to see you all. Thank you, Ben.
Okay. Thank you, Fong. Thank you. And now I guess we'll hear from Raha, Henry, or you can send us out.
Yeah, that would be great. I would just say it's our tradition at the Brooklyn Rail to conclude our lunchtime with poems. And today we are going to return to Jonas's poetry. And Raha, if you could take it away. Thank you.
Yes, it's a poem by Jonas. They say the days for ideals are over. Be practical, work hard, study, or fly to the moon. But I go on living in a daze, a bit remote, like a misfit. They all say yes, but I'll say no. From basic principles like salt. Some kind of born dissident. Worse yet, an anarchist. Even friends are growing suspicious. With a hand sweep, a parting glare, I toss on my scarf, stick a book of poems in my pocket, and take off. Sorry, I read so badly. But...
No, it was good. It was great. It was perfect.
Thank you so much, Raha.
We're all poets. We're all poets. Everybody's a poet.
Just track that book down.
I can read it again if you want me to.
Track that book down. It's called Day Books, and it's just a wonderful coming together of traditionalist, haiku, descriptive. It's a wonderful book.
Yeah, that's on his website, and we're going to reprint some of it in the catalog. So again, the catalog will be a great amalgamation of everyone. And again, I want to thank Keith Smith Gallery and all the artists who participated from all over the world and in all mediums. And come visit 4th Street, Keith Smith Gallery, or the Annex, 181 Mott Street. And I guess we're going to let Jonas have the last word. It'll bring a tear to your eye. This was actually filmed for a Berlin show, which he was supposed to visit. He had been to see Mike Figgis, and that was, I think, his last trip overseas, and he didn't make it to Berlin. So he recorded this in front of, just the camera in front of him and sent it. And I was there, and I remember it, and I thought, wow, And so when I did a little tribute thing, I added it, and here it is. Thanks, everyone.
So now, the evening is yours. Keep singing. Keep singing. Times are bad. Not everything is that beautiful in the world around us. So we have to keep singing. When one sings, one is happy. And that makes angels happy. So let us sing. Let us sing. Let us sing our songs. Let's keep singing. Let's keep singing.
Great. Thank you so much to Chuck, Ben, Leah, Lee, Raha, David, and everyone that participated in this fantastic conversation. It is so great to hear your memories of Jonas, your thoughts about his legacy, and for you to outline his values so that we know how to best remember him. Everyone must go to Keysmith that can. I just put more information about the show again in the chat. And I will just finish by sharing with you the Brooklyn Rails donations page. This October marked the Rails 20th anniversary, and we'll be celebrating all the way into 2021. Please consider making a year-end contribution to the Rail and our special project to keep the Rail and our special projects free, relevant, and independent, like the new Social Environment Lunchtime series and our We the Immigrants project. Every amount matters to us, and our goal is to double last year's participation and reach 500 donors. Check out the chat for more information, or feel free to ask our team members for more information. Please join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for our 16th Radical Poetry reading, curated by the poet Chris Martin and featuring poetry read by Hannah Emerson, Adam Wolfand, Lauren Russell, and Fareed Matuk. Without anything else to say, I would just like to reiterate, thank you so much to everyone that participated in this conversation.
Thank you, Henry.
And take care. Long live Jonas, as I saw frequently in the chat.
And he does. He lives on.
Yeah, and
Thank
so
you, everyone.
I'm going to unmute everyone so we can all say our thank yous.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank
you, Chuck. Thank you,
Thanks,
Ben.
David.
Thank you, David.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Raha.
Raha.
Thank you, everyone.
Very nice.
Thank you, Lee and Leah.
The Pirates.
Snap people.
Come on. Thank you, Pirates.
Thank you,
Don't go to the military. Be a pirate.
Hey, Raha, read everybody your T-shirt.
I will. And Ben, let's have a Zoom meeting too. I miss you. So let's just.
You too, man. You too, very much.
Okay.
This is something that Jonas wrote on the wall in Paris. Keep
Yeah,
singing.
it's printed by Agnès Bear.
Oh, it's beautiful, Raha.
Keep dancing. Keep singing. Have a good drink.
Yes, that's our philosophy.
Too serious.
Be fearless.
Don't
Thanks,
get
Ben.
serious. Don't get serious.
Oh my God.